Sportageous. Sport gets smarter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sportageous Videocast, where we bring you insights into the sporting world, straight from athletes, sports biz, sports professionals, and more. Our guest today is Ali Salama, founder of Empower Magazine, the first mental health and wellness magazine in the Middle East. He also recently launched the Middle East and North Africa's first mental health and sports conference, SportsMENTA. Ali, welcome to the show.
Sushan, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Look, mate, I've obviously had the pleasure of attending the SportsMENTA conference. So before we sort of go into that discussion, and I really want to break down a bit of your thoughts on the conference and the content coming out of the conference. Before that, tell me a little bit about Empower, SportsMENTA, and why you decided to go down this path.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point to start off with. I'm an athlete, Zushan. So before I got into becoming a mental health spokesperson, ambassador, things that relate to activism in a manner that it drives social change. I can, if you look back, like those are all medals. I am a swimmer. I was signed to Al Nasser here in the UAE. I swam in Canada. The person I grew up swimming with is now NCAA champion and two-time Olympian, Farida Osman. So we swam in the same squad growing up. So this was my life prior to everything else. So I think, once an athlete is always an athlete. But but when I sort of went to Canada, I've had a lot of struggles. Then I realized how important I was neglecting my mental health. And then suddenly it was an epitome that made me realize I needed to go into that route. So a year later, I decided that what more of an important way that can we tackle this problem, especially in mental health, in the sports world, when it's viewed as an entertainment. You see Salah, you see so many great people, but you don't think of that side that is invisible, and that side has been so important in times of like change or crisis such as COVID, when we all are more open and speaking about it. So I felt that was a great time for us to start, and I felt that was a very important time to have that conversation.
Yeah, right. And it's interesting that, you mentioned that you were an athlete, and then you obviously went down this path, and now you work in the mental health space and to sort of promote discussion, encourage engagement, that sort of thing on these topics. Being an athlete, were you ever of mine, or did you ever think that, hey, swimming is the path that I'm going to go down that's not going to be my career?
I did not like swimming, Zushan. I swam because I caused a lot of problems at home. So the day I wasn't swimming was the day my mom had a headache. So I've always been a high functioning sort of person ever since. I don't know if some people like to just label names on themselves, such as like I have the OCD, AD, all these labels that I really don't like to associate myself with. But I definitely do feel like, without diagnosis, of course, but I definitely do feel like I had a lot of energy growing up, and that was a very healthy way of putting that energy into a healthy manner of channeling that. Because do I ever felt that I was going to be a professional athlete? Perhaps if I played football, because that was my dream, like any young Egyptian. But no, and I don't think that many even footballers, athletes' careers, there isn't that much education on what to do post-career. So I liked how you tackle this question, because it is a very important question in regards to the well-being of the player on the long term.
Yeah, precisely. That's sort of what I wanted to bring up, and I guess we'll sort of merge that in with talking about SportsMENTA. And what I see a lot with a lot of athletes, the issues that often arise are exactly what you're touching on. Post career, what do? I haven't set myself up necessarily, or I don't have the resources, not me personally, the athlete. I'm not an athlete. Uh, but they haven't set themselves up. They don't know how to take the next step. And that in turn, from what I understand, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, results in a lot of mental health issues like depression, anxiety, what's to come next, uncertainty. Uh, in your own conversations and coverage and other aspects of what you do, have you come across these sort of situations or heard from other athletes who have talked about these kind of things?
Yeah, I just got off of a call with the PSA, so the Professional Sports Association Foundation, and what happened was that they were discussing how hard it was for players who weren't in the top sort of 10 ranking, how hard it was for them to make a living. But that just reflects on, well, what if the career is over? Well, it just brought forward the reality. And so I think with what you're saying, have I seen this? I mean, it's happening right now. It's not something that we have to wait for. But typically speaking, athletes who aren't, acclaimed or and I really don't like to say that, but like we both know what that means. That means that if you have reached that pinnacle, that other people deem you to be a star. And sports isn't meant for you to just be a star. It's more than that. There's so many other benefits. So I think that, circling back to the point, I do see that that is a big, big, big challenge. And I see that, it needs to be tackled. And that's why we're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you've obviously kicked things off on that front, at least specifically for the region that, you are in and you're based in. And like I mentioned earlier, I had the pleasure of being a part of the SportsMENTA Conference and then, doing a cover with you guys as well. For everyone watching or listening, by the way, wherever you are, be sure to check out the Empower, SportsMENTA, and Ali's socials. They'll be everywhere. So follow him, follow the organization, give him a heads up if you have anything you want to ask. Coming to the SportsMENTA Conference, Ali, can you give me an overview? I mean, I know I've been there, but I want to sort of hear about what stood out for you and what that experience was like itself.
Yeah, that's also like a very good question. Look, Zushan, I did not expect what the response was because I don't think this has ever been done. And not that it hasn't been done. I have a personal connection with a few athletes. So had I not perhaps had that warm connection, I wouldn't say it was like super warm, but I made sure before we hop on that I have two calls with them. Kenzie is a very close friend of mine within my inner circle. So
Yeah.
again, I know you previously asked, well, how did you put things together? What was your approach and how were you able to get this content out? I think bottom line is the only reason why we need to do these things is because there aren't safe spaces. So when you make safe spaces, when you put people in comfortable positions, when you tell them, I'm not trying to sell you out, I'm trying to make you safe. And in making you safe, I want to make other people safe. So I'm not trying to play the press game. I'm not trying to play a headline game. I'm trying to play the real game. And I think that this is what we need to do here. And I think that in approaching that, circling back to your question, I really wanted to, I knew the issues because I was an athlete. I knew that parenting was a big, big, big issue. And I knew that pressure sometimes makes diamonds, but sometimes it cracks diamonds. So when do you know the right pressure? When do you know when to apply the right pressure, right? So yeah, there are really cool sayings, the world number ones. Oh, that's really cool and bubbly, but what really does it take?
Yeah.
How do you talk to yourself? And I think those were the things that I wanted to highlight because I don't think many people out there know what it takes to be a champion. And that takes a whole lot of self-care and a whole lot of mental health awareness that those athletes just proved.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite interesting that you talk about things like safe spaces and, being able to express what one is going through. I think you and I both know well that if we look at mental health awareness in the Middle East and North Africa, it's far behind other parts of the world. You know, if we're talking about myself here in Australia, or you in when you were in Canada, you notice it, you see it. Sure, it's, you know, more work can be done there as well, but it's significantly more awareness around it than there is in the Middle East and in North Africa. What has been the biggest challenge for you, both in a general context, but also particularly with raising awareness around mental health and sport? Um, Being in that region, you know, you sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, but perhaps you could expand upon that a little bit about the challenges of raising awareness, stigma, and so on.
Yeah, I think Zushan, we have to be aware that like sports predominantly, while I am the biggest fan of women's sports, predominantly male athletes take a lot more attention in the world.
Yep.
And we can beg to disagree, but this is the true reality. And that presents a lot of challenges because we in regions where in to the world we are minorities, at least from a power perspective. uh, we think in certain ways, and we have habits that typically aren't that healthy through generational, generation upon generation has built that. So I think that has been the biggest struggle. That has been the biggest struggle. How can you be a man and just be this competitive, be this champion, be this
Yeah.
tough, but still like be easy on yourself and still be that loving person and still actually have a healthy competition? Because I think that that's what separates uh, a true legend in sports from just a great player. And because that is what an icon does way beyond the sport. And I think that in understanding that through reading, Mike Tyson's bio and through reading so many other historical icons that I personally look up to, I found that that is the biggest struggle. How can we tackle the mental well-being of players through, of course, those who have the largest platforms, but also get them to speak about something that makes them very uncomfortable because they still view mental health as, even if they don't view it privately as as not a shame, but as something that they don't want to speak about because of the perception. Publicly, they don't show it. And like, I can speak about Mo Salah and I can speak about so many other examples, but unfortunately as well, something I really want to point out to all the listeners listening out there. I personally have a great relationship with the Egyptian striker and Champions League striker, Ahmed Hassan Kuka. He's the number 9 striker for Olympiacos and for Egypt. Now, when we spoke together, I realized a lot of things that I didn't know about footballers and people who are in, playing top tier sports. But what I also realized is that he was probably the only person in the national squad who have the most power, social power, in a country like Egypt, which represents quarter of the Arab population, that was able to speak to me about mental health for more than 20 minutes. So what I want to say is that we can't try to pressure athletes go speak about it, because those athletes grew up from 6 years old to 20 years old on a pitch. Education level wasn't that great. They sacrificed so much.
Yeah.
So being so emotionally intelligent to understand that needs to come from a point of empathy, so we can work together and be like, yeah, you respect me for my education, I respect you for the platform that you have, let's work together, versus, hey, this is a power dynamic, let's rub shoulders and like, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you know, my personal sort of view is from the region. I think, for example, in the UAE, things, awareness has really gotten better compared to where it was when I left about 10 years ago, having lived there all my life before that. And it's great to see that, but on a wider scale, you know, you're talking like exactly like you said, you're talking about the UAE, and then you're comparing that to a place like Yemen where it's virtually non-existent. Um,
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
bridging that gap, in my opinion, is very important. I think you highlight the means to do that really, really well. Um, I guess moving back to the uh, SportsMENTA conference and sort of wrapping things up, Ali, what do you see moving forward for SportsMENTA? What is the vision? What is the dream? What, the next iteration, whenever that takes place, what do you hope to get out of it for this discussion as a whole?
That is, I think, what like excited me the most about this interview, because I think that starting something is great. Anyone can start something, but that's just 1% of the entire vision. The vision is a lot bigger than an online event. The vision is an in-person, real-life event tackling all facets of sports, including gender. We want to actually, because what is mental health, Zushan? Mental health isn't depression, anxiety, and all these things that people think about. Mental health is quality of life, period. So how can we make sure that in sports we have great quality of life, which for many people actually don't think that isn't always the case. So I think, how can we create a platform and in an in-person event with an online yearly activation that can allow people to have great psycho education or mental health education, for lack of a better word? And how can we also include awards? How can we make sure players are incentivized to take part in that conversation, raise their kids to also become part of that ecosystem? Because all that I'm doing is I'm an enabler. I'm a communicator. I'm not a service provider. I'm just someone who will communicate how important it is for you to just take that into consideration. Nothing more, nothing less. So that's what SportsMENTA is going to do. And hopefully the end goal is to have, football clubs in Yemen, like in every part of the Middle East, hire psychologists, sports psychologists, bring that know-how into the sports, because of the importance that SportsMENTA sheds light on through the lens of mental health and sports. So that's kind of like what the bigger dream is. And of course, as I start to venture into more and more athletes, having more and more conversations, I definitely want to be able to bring it to an international scale and not just a Middle Eastern scale.
Absolutely, mate. I think it's fantastic what you're doing, and one example that always comes to mind for me, being here in Australia, is that just in 2019 and 2020 alone, we saw numerous Australian cricketers come out and talk about taking mental health breaks and not wanting to continue playing for a while to go and look after their well-being, and to take that time off, get some time away from the light, and the wonders that it did for them. So if that can be translated, at least even if that conversation can be initiated on a global scale, I think that's, we're getting there. So look, Ali, I wish you all the best, mate. I will be at SportsMENTA next time around as well, whether that's virtually or in person, we will see. But however it is, I would love to continue being a part of it. For everyone watching or listening, as you may know, we are hosting the Squash Summit soon, and we're really proud to have Ali and SportsMENTA as our mental health partners for the summit. Once again, be sure to head over to their social media, give them a follow, a like, get in touch if you have any questions, and if you're an athlete and have a story that you might want to talk about, Ali's your guy. Ali, thanks so much for coming on, mate.
Appreciate it, Zushan. Cheers. Thank you, mate.
Thanks.